locomotive breath. Runs the all-time music.
Your song Locomotive Breath, you've said that it's inspired by your concern about population. How did that arise?
I've written 2 or 3 songs that perhaps are on the issue of climate change, going back to the 70s, and things that were to do with social issues. And in the case of Locomotive Breath, it wasn't just about population growth. It hints at the whole runaway train of globalization, of capitalism being a kind of rampant controller of everybody's lives, particularly those who govern. In my lifetime, since 1947, the population on planet Earth has increased. I often ask people this question, how many more people do you think there have been on the planet since I was born? 50% more, 100% more? They usually say, 50%, 60% more. And then I can say, actually, it's slightly more than 3 times as many people on our fragile planet compared to the year I was born. It's definitely cause for serious thought about management, resources, and how many. We get into always the problem of imbalances. There is no equity in terms of population growth, in terms of fertility rates, and in terms of the impact of climate change. Climate change, population joined at the hip. The perfect storm that our grandchildren or my grandchildren are likely to have to face. But it's about the inequality. It doesn't just balance itself neatly out across the planet in the sense that we all have the same issues, we all have the same growth or drop in fertility rates, as is slightly the case in Western Europe, for example. It gets so much more complicated, and these are the things that people really do have to do their own bit of serious reading and research about in order to make the responsible decision. If you tell me you're just dead set on, you've just got married, you're 25 years old, and your wife and you have decided you want to have 4 children, you want to have 6 children, then all I can do is say, well, okay, your decision, but think it through, see what the implications are. Especially if you live in the Western world and your 6 children are going to become major consumers of resources and major contributors to a carbon footprint, then think it through. And in a responsible world, you would hope everybody, globally, we would take the same careful decisions to enjoy the great passion, the great joy of having a child, the miracle perhaps of having 2 children. But I've always said, having 1 child is a blessing. Having 2 children is a miracle. Having 3 children can be the start of a collection. But I'm never going to tell people how many children they should have. I am going to tell them, think about it, come to your conclusions carefully, and then we'll all live with the consequences.
You've done some creative things to make people, oh my God, I better do something about that. Could you ever imagine doing something like that on population?
I like to embed it in the songs. It's there for people to find, but I don't really want to go out there and use that as a platform. Going back to this idea of climate change and population changes being joined at the hip, it goes back a long way. It goes back to the early 70s. It didn't really radically take root, I think, in people's minds, the scientific community's minds, generally speaking, until the 80s. But since then, there's been this momentum, this snowball going down a slope, gathering pace, gathering volume. When it was first apparent a few months back, it seemed like maybe it was a year ago, when children, not quite globally, but in many countries, went on strike and didn't turn up for school to make their statement about climate change. My immediate reaction was, that's a very selfish and silly thing to do. Their parents are, in many cases, paying for their education. They're going to all this trouble to do that, and they just goof off from school. They could make the point in another way. I've changed my mind. There should be that moment where children actually do say, this is more important than losing a day of school. Go out there, march in the streets, make it clear to everybody, this is your world. This is your future. Now is the time to go out there and start to make an impact.
Don't screw the planet! Don't screw the planet!
Why you chose to join and support Population Matters?
Well, it crystallized for me quite a lot of elements that for many decades have been filtering through my mind in different ways, and I've read a few things over the years and continue to do so today. But I think it for me was rather important because it was bringing all of this together in an accessible way, and because it did have behind it some patrons who were people that I greatly admired and respected for their work in similar or other fields. I felt that it was a very legitimate body embarking upon something that was very, very difficult to actually do in the marketplace of the economy and the political world in which we live. It's a real stinker to have to go out there, as you will obviously know far better than I, to go out there and actually try to make that difference, because either people will be polite but ultimately listen with a fairly deaf ear and go away and do what they were going to do in the first place, or they will be downright hostile because they'll keep coming back to this idea that you're trying to tell them how they should live their lives or do whatever. And I don't think, from what I know of the population trust, that's far from the view of anybody that I've ever heard of. I think everybody does absolutely respect the right of the individual to make those choices.
Well, I think we're all conflicted, and we all have different levels of carbon guilt.
There is an element of guilt there as well, and I hope I don't lose that. I would hate to be smug and self-satisfied thinking, oh, what a good boy am I. I've always felt that, we should carry a degree of guilt and responsibility with us. And, of course, you buy your way out of the proverbial to some extent, and that's why the issues, the huge dilemmas, the conflicts in terms of ethics and moral colliding, it's something we have to deal with. There's no easy answer to it, but the guilt comes with it. It's part of the job if we're going to think about and act upon this stuff. And I would just say to anybody, don't let the guilt fade away. We do all bear some responsibility. This generation, the one before, and the next one to come, if they don't do the things that my parents and I did little about.
Nowhere to slow down. Nowhere to slow down. No way to slow down. No way to slow down.